Hello, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the August 12th, 2021 special meeting of the Housing Element Community Engagement and Outreach Committee, or CEOC. My name is Calvin Chan, Senior Planner with the Community Development Department for the City of Menlo Park. Before we begin tonight's special meeting of the CEOC, I would like to announce that tonight's August 12th meeting agenda and items are a continuation of the meeting of August 5, which was canceled last week due to a lack of a quorum. In addition, please note that while the majority of tonight's staff report is the same as was prepared and distributed for the meeting of August 5, the August 12 staff report includes updated information for activities and meetings that have been completed since. This concludes my announcement, and I will now turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Alarvia, who will make an announcement in the absence of Chair Fennell regarding the management of tonight's meeting before we call to order.
Hello. So I'm gonna do the first part of the meeting, but I have to work. Things are a little crazy right now, so I wanted to nominate someone to run the meeting after I leave. I will log back on, but I won't be able to be on camera. I want to nominate Rich if possible, if he'll agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I can run the meeting. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
So
No problem. Sorry you have to work.
Delta, it's crazy right now. So do a roll call. Well, call to order, then roll call. And for this, am I just announcing the names that are here and just
You can, or you can ask me to do it.
I would love for you to do it, Calvin. Awesome.
Member Tronson?
Here.
Member Spalding?
Here.
Member Robledo?
Here.
Member McMahon?
Here.
Member Lee? Member Richard Lee? Okay, I see Member Richard Lee raising his hand. Member Feldman?
Here.
Member Klein? I see Member Klein raising his hand. Member Dow?
Yeah, keep muting it.
Here.
Vice Chair Alarvia?
Here.
Thank you. And just to note for the record that members Bortnick, Desenia, and Chair Fennell are absent this evening.
Alrighty. Now we've reached the time for public comment. The public may address the Housing Element Community Engagement and Outreach Committee on any subject not listed on the agenda. Each speaker can make public comment for a limit of 3 minutes once. The CEOC cannot act on items not listed on the agenda other than to provide general information. Do we have any public comment?
Thank you, Vice Chair Alarvia. At this time, we ask that members of the CEOC please remain on screen for the duration of the meeting. You will control your own webcams and microphones, and please keep mics on mute when not speaking so as to avoid any cross sound. Staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentations and also respond to members of the CEOC. For members of the public who are in attendance this evening and wish to provide public comment, after the Vice Chair calls for a public comment on the item on which you wish to speak on, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And for those who are calling in and joining us by landline or cell phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand. Staff will then have the ability to open your microphone and you can provide your public comment to the CEOC. We'll give everyone a few minutes to raise their virtual hands if there is any public comment. Vice Chair Alarvia, there is no public comment.
Okay. Moving on to the consent calendar. So first, the CEOC summary meeting minutes from July 15th, 2021. So are we consenting to that?
Yes, so we are asking the CEOC if they would like to approve the minutes or if there are any revisions that can be made.
Anyone have,
I'll just move to approve it if you need somebody to do that.
I second.
okay. All righty.
And just to confirm for the record, Member Klein motioned to approve, and then Member Spalding seconded, and we're seeing that there is no objection, and it will be approved as submitted by staff.
Okay. We'll move to line item E, regular business. E1 is update on recent housing element update community outreach activities. Staff report, the link right there.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And the M Group, which is the lead project consultant for the housing element update, they will be providing the presentation for this business item.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Vice Chair Lavia and members of the CEOC. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see that? Yes?
Yep.
Yes.
Looks good.
Great, thank you. So good evening, everyone. Here is a summary of what we'll go over tonight. We've done a few outreach events and there's more to do. So we would like your comments and feedback on some of the outreach events. But let me go over some of the completed activities. So we've had a couple of focus groups, one for the renters and the homeowners. So that's round one. We are planning to do round two of the renters and focus groups as well. And then there's a few other focus groups that we'll be conducting, and we'll talk about that as well later in the presentation. The survey is online. It's available in both English and Spanish. And we have the online version and paper copies as well. We've conducted a couple of pop-ups, one in the downtown farmers market and one in Bellhaven, and I'll talk about that later in the presentation as well. And we had a housing commission study session to discuss preliminary land use strategies, and that went really well as well. Before we get into some of the outreach that is planned, I kind of want to explain to the CEOC just our approach. So it's going to be a parallel approach for policy development and also the land use strategy, the housing strategies. So I just kind of want to talk through the housing strategy process first, because the policy approach is going to start a little bit later. So it started with the Housing Commission study session. And then we're going to have a community meeting on the preliminary land use strategies, just like we did at the Housing Commission. And that's really just kind of discussing ideas in terms of how we can meet the RENA. The community meeting is going to be held on Saturday at 10 o'clock, so everyone's invited. And it's going to be slightly different from the Housing Commission meeting in that it'll be tailored a little bit more for the public. And then we're going to have a community workshop. And then this is really going to be focused on housing strategies itself, and then opportunity sites and opportunity areas. And this is where the public can and members of the community can come in and really help provide feedback on where housing should and can go. And with this workshop, with the input that we received, along with the input from the survey, the focus groups, interviews, pop-ups, and some of the other meetings, we will develop 3 land use strategies, and that will be presented to the Plan Commission and Housing Commission, and then ultimately that will be provided to the City Council. And again, this is just the housing strategies portion of it. There's going to be a parallel track for the policies as well. Here are some of the upcoming outreach efforts, and we wanted to get your feedback, and if you have any questions, please let us know. So we're going to have some more focus groups. Again, round 1 of the renters and the homeowners is already complete, but we're going to have focus groups for housing service providers, businesses, and also housing developers. For the businesses, it's really focused on some of the small local businesses. We'll have a separate conversation for some of the larger employers like SRI and some of the other major landholders. Well, we'll also conduct individual interviews for seniors, veterans, people with disabilities, other people that may not be represented by standard community interest groups, and then also people who may not have access to Zoom or other types of technology. We'll just call them in person. We're more than happy to do that, to hear their story and to get feedback and really try to understand what their concerns and ideas are. The survey is out. It's been provided in English and in Spanish, and it'll be open through August 29th. We have paper copies as well, and we've provided stamped return envelopes so people can fill out the survey and just put in an envelope and put it in the mailbox. And we try to make it super easy for people. Here is what the survey looks like online, both in the English and Spanish. And again, with the paper copies, we try to make it super easy so that people can just fill it out and send it back to City Hall. We also developed a flyer for the survey, both with QR codes and a short description of the project and the survey itself. And then on the back side, which you can't see here, we provided housing resources, and that was in response to a suggestion by the CEOC. It was a great idea. We've had a couple of pop-ups, and we're going to have a few more. So we had one in downtown, the Farmers Market, and we had one at Mi Terralinda supermarket in Belhaven. So for the future pop-ups, there's going to be a couple more rounds. So round 2 of the pop-ups, we're going to have parallel pop-ups in downtown Farmers Market and in Belhaven, both on August 29th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And so a few members of the CEOC had signed up for some of the pop-ups, and signups for these pop-ups will be available as well. And then round 3 will occur on different days, September 12th at 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the downtown Farmers Market, and then in Belhaven on September 18th from 10 to 2. Here are some photos of the pop-ups. The one in the downtown Farmers Market, it was very well attended. We got a lot of the foot traffic from the people who were just attending the farmers market. I believe 30 or so people actually filled out the survey in person, and I saw a number of people just snapping the QR codes. I think that helped with some of the online surveys. We also had one in Belhaven. It wasn't quite as busy, but we did have a regular flow. I think the major difference between the downtown Farmers Market pop-up and the Belhaven pop-up is that people who were coming to the supermarket, they were very busy, and then they didn't really have time to stand there and fill out the survey, but they were more than willing to take the survey home and fill it out and mail it back to us. Some of the community members were also very helpful, and they took some surveys home to give to their neighbors. And so the people that we talked to were helping out with the community outreach. Christabel in our office speaks Spanish, and she was very instrumental in reaching out to the community. And she said about 85% of the people spoke Spanish, and about 15% of the people spoke English. I think we provided a little over 80 hard copies of the Spanish translated survey to the community at that pop-up.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yes.
I'm just curious why you didn't provide information for the focus groups when you had the opportunity.
We didn't think of it. We tried to talk to people about the various events and the other things that were going on, but there was just so little time because people were on their way out. And so of the
Because what I'm concerned about is that, and I appreciate that you're doing that because I ran into you guys. I went over there to get my surveys.
Yes.
And my concern is when it comes to outreach, effective outreach,
Mhm.
if we're not providing them information for upcoming events,
Mhm.
then when you're telling me about focus groups, we miss the opportunity to give a flyer with somebody that's telling them what's coming up in the future. And my whole goal is to get as many participants from the community here as possible, especially from Belhaven, because again, historically, it's always been overlooked, and now we're trying to make some efforts here, and we're missing an opportunity that we had that said the flyer, because we have these focus groups, and we don't have representation from Belhaven, then I think it sort of contradicts what we were trying to do. And that's my big concern.
We're sending out invites for the focus groups. And I think Calvin can talk about some of the outreach that the city is doing in terms of reaching out to focus groups as well. And we can talk about that after the presentation, if you'd like. Moving on. So we'll also be providing project galleries, both in Belhaven and the main library. And the idea behind that is to have paper copies of all the things that are going on. So for people who may not have access to the internet, people can just walk into the library and know what some of the upcoming events are, some of the things that's been discussed at some of the meetings. It's really designed to be kind of a low-tech forum, and it would be provided both in the Belhaven and the main branch library.
Quick comment on this slide. I would like it if the term low tech disappeared from this and just say alternative forum or something like that.
Okay. Great. Yes, we will make note of that.
Also on that, will you be using the same sort of posters that we had at the pop-up?
Yes, we'll have similar posters, and then we'll have binders of printouts of CEOC meetings and some of the other documents as well. Once we have the draft documents for the housing element, environmental justice, and safety elements, those will be provided. And then once the environmental impact report is ready, those will also be provided at the pop-ups, or I'm sorry, at the project galleries. Is there any other questions? No? Okay. So we also just recently had a Housing Commission study session, and it went really well. We got a lot of comments from the Housing Commission and members of the public. One thing that we wanted to bring up is that these city meetings are a good forum to talk about policies. And so members of the CEOC can attend these meetings as a resident and provide comments, just like anyone else in the community. And we just wanted to let you know in case that you were interested. And then this Saturday, we are going to have a community meeting that's very similar to what we presented at the Housing Commission to talk about preliminary land use strategies. And at this meeting, Spanish interpretation will also be provided. We're also going to have a meeting on August 26th to talk about housing equity, environmental justice, and safety. So we'll be providing background information on these three topics, and also provide an opportunity for the members of the public to provide more feedback than that they would in the survey, because there's only a couple of questions that were focused on EJ and safety. Yes, Member Johnson.
The meeting that you said that is going to happen this weekend, is that only in person, or is there also a virtual presentation of it?
This community meeting will be only online via Zoom.
Oh, it is online. Okay.
Yes, it'll be online.
And where can we find the info on that? Is that on the committee's website?
Yes, this information is on the project website, and the Zoom information is there as well.
Thank you.
You know, Sung, I'm still a little, disturbed at the fact that there's a meeting coming up this weekend. And you guys are doing the surveys this past weekend, and they weren't informed of a meeting coming up this weekend. And this is the consistent issue that we have around people being informed of meetings and focus groups that take place in the community. And it feels, again, contradicting, defeating the purpose of what we're trying to do in doing outreach. If we're not providing people information on when meetings are taking place in the communities, then what are we doing? And I get very frustrated with this because there's a week in between having been doing these pop-ups, and then there's a meeting the following Saturday, and you didn't provide any information about it. So it almost feels strategic. Like, if you want people to participate, they need to know. I'm real frustrated about that.
So last Friday, we did send out this information to a variety of community groups that we have email lists for. And we are planning on providing the actual Zoom information tomorrow, hopefully.
Tomorrow's Friday, so you're gonna send it out tomorrow for a meeting on Saturday.
Well, we sent out an initial email last Friday to let them know about the meeting, and then we're gonna send out the Zoom information tomorrow.
And who's them?
We have a list of various community groups. We went through that list of community groups with the CEOC, several meetings on it, and we've
I
been.
remember. Okay.
Yes.
And if I may add to Sung's description, we have also provided advertisement of our upcoming events via our weekly digest, which is part of the city's e-newsletter. Also on the housing resources flyer, they also list the upcoming events that we have, including the one this Saturday. We have done targeted emails to different community groups, including over 60 community groups that the CEOC has helped us form that list. In addition, some additional groups that we have received correspondence and interest from. So we have done a variety of different avenues to spread the word about these events, but we welcome your feedback if there are other opportunities.
One of the things that I've requested and never gotten a response, which tends to happen a lot with meetings when we have our rants, is I've been asking repeatedly for those neon signs that get put up in the communities around don't do fireworks or don't do this. And we've used them in the past to inform the community of meetings that are taking place. Why can't we use those? Why can't we set those up? Because again, and hopefully I'll say this last time, if we want participants from segments of the community, all the organizations that you might be working with, which are great, because a lot of them do work in the communities. But if they don't live in the community, because there was a lot of groups on that list from in Redwood City throughout San Mateo, but we're focusing on Menlo Park. So if we want to inform the communities in Menlo Park, then I think we should make some efforts around getting some of these neon signs that are posted that you can put on wheels, put it on Willow, put it on Middlefield, and let's inform the community. Because we always assume that everybody is accessible and uses social media and informative venues the same way, and they don't. And again, our whole purpose is to do more effective outreach because historically it hasn't been effective. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments, and we are noting your suggestions.
So I will chime in because Victoria always makes me do this. I noticed that there's Atherton fiber signs strung across Middlefield and Marsh Road. Do we have signs like that out in the community talking about the plan and gathering data? And then secondarily, if we have a communication strategy like that, do we have sort of a pop-up way for people to participate in a Zoom meeting? So people may be busy, don't have a laptop, don't have internet. Do we have pods set up, say, outside of the libraries where people could just walk up and participate? So I suggest those as two strategies.
Those are great.
Sung, does Jeff guys ask a clarifying question of member McMahon? Dan, your first part of your comments, were you talking about banners strung over the road?
Yeah. So I see every time I drive up to Middlefield on Marsh Road, Atherton Fiber called this number, and it's just a big banner that everyone who drives through town sees, right?
Right.
So I'm sure you can get those online and get them produced relatively quickly. I think it could be done actually for this cycle or that we're going through right now. And then the second half of that is just catching people. Maybe you can project the meeting onto the side of a wall outdoors, which is more COVID appropriate, under the shade, and have a laptop set up with speakers and a microphone, and people can just sort of, as they're coming to and from the community center, participate for a few moments at the very least.
Those are great
Got
ideas.
Thank
Dan.
you.
But they're not being done. This is my point. These ideas about what we could be doing to inform people about meetings aren't being done, and now the meeting's Saturday. So it's just really frustrating for me, extremely.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
We do,
Yes.
but what gets done with them?
Yeah, one is just, are we taking full advantage of schools that are back and their communication channels, so that they can, I mean, it's all related. So usually we have good partnerships with the schools, and so their distributions, channels for things like this that are, this is a wide scale issue that applies to so many people, that usually they're pretty helpful in putting something in and promoting it. I wouldn't dare say give things to kids to bring home, because that's pretty much for toddlers only. But high school channels, some of the middle school stuff, they have reach, so trying to just partner with them.
Yes.
And I'll just say that's a great spot for the more banners, right? At pickup and drop off.
Yeah.
Is there any other comments or questions before I move on with the presentation?
I do have a few of them, but I will hold until you're done with your presentation.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see, where were we? So we're going to have the community meeting on housing equity, environmental justice, and safety. The purpose of this meeting is really to provide some foundational information on those subjects, and also to get more outreach opportunities than what was provided in the survey. And that's scheduled for August 26th. We're also going to have a community workshop on housing strategies. And this workshop is important in that this will be pivotal in terms of developing the 3 land use strategies. So the information that we get from this meeting, along with the information we got from the previous meetings, the survey, the pop-ups, and the other outreach, will help form the 3 land use strategies that will be provided to the Plan Commission, Housing Commission, and then to the City Council. And in terms of next steps, so there's 2 parallel tracks, one for the housing land use strategies, and then one for the policies. And then once that's complete, we'll have a draft document that will be provided to HCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, for comment. And then that will be, we'll take their comments, put the document together, and then an environmental impact report will be provided. And that'll happen next year. And then once the EIR is completed, then it'll go to Housing Commission, Plan Commission, and City Council for adoption. But the bulk of the outreach is going to happen in the next couple to few months. So that's sort of what's going on in terms of the long-term overall schedule. And then before we go into the comments, we just wanted to remind the viewers that if you want to email the city, you can do so on the webpage. And you can also sign up for updates on the project. And that's available at www.menlopark.org/housing element. And we're here to answer any questions and hear your comments. We would definitely like feedback on some of the future events that we're planning.
So, Sung, I'm not sure if this question goes to you, but there's obviously different types of feedback that you get based on the type of event that you have, right? So you have pop-ups where it's ad hoc, people giving you comments, there's data generated from questionnaires, paper or online. How do you guys balance? What's your approach to balance the inputs to make sure that you get a clear view or a very representative view of what the inputs are? So if you have a pop-up meeting where there's two people who monopolize and have lots of comments, how do you make sure that that doesn't override lesser amounts of comments that might be equally important that come from other people in other, other data collection milieus? And if that's something that needs to be discussed at a different part of the meeting, that's fine with me as well.
I think Jeff might be able to answer that question.
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer for that. Member McMahon, I think I would like to think about that because I understand what you're getting at. I mean, at this point, early in the process, we're focused on, like you said, as many different aspects of the population. People who are in different situations have different viewpoints. And we haven't gotten to the point where we're hearing, the same thing over and over again from a certain segment or person or group. And so, but you're right, at some point you have to characterize the input accurately as, an interesting comment, but, a one-off comment versus things that come up repeatedly as a theme or a pattern or a trend, and be able to sort of explain the context of all of the input that we're collecting. So we'll take up the challenge and think about how we could do a better job explaining how we do that.
That's great. And I agree with your perspective. Capture everything now.
I'd like to just sort of ask that when we, like Dan made suggestions, I made suggestions about the neon street sign. Who can give me an answer whether we can pursue that? Because again, we keep saying things and then we get thanked for the comment, but then that's it. And I'm really like almost up to here that we are suggesting things and you're accepting these comments and then nothing. No, we're just ranting. So I'd like to know who is documenting this. I know you're documenting, you're recording it. And when can we come back to it and say, okay, we looked into that sign and yeah, we can get those done, or yes, we did this and we're going to get that done. Nothing is addressed from the previous meetings. And when are we going to address those things? Because I specifically asked, can we do a neon street sign? I got thanked for my comment. I want an answer. Can we do that? Is there someone that we can address to bring that and put them on the streets? Is there someone we can talk to about getting some signs? Like when we want signs in the city, we get them. We get them. Christmas events happening, big signs hanging, farmers markets, big signs happening, COVID testing, big signs. How about this community focus meeting happening and have that hanging somewhere where people can see it? I want some solid answers and I don't feel like I'm getting them.
We can go back and work with staff, Vicky, on the ideas around signage, and that's a very concrete recommendation. And
it was recommended around 3 meetings ago.
No, and I think it's a really good idea. Just like we're setting up a project gallery to have a very accessible forum for people who don't spend a great deal of time on their computers or smartphones. We need to be thinking about ways to get the message out other than just emails and social media. So I think it's a good solid
Can we get
recommendation.
like a time frame? Is it possible to get time frames when these things can be done? Because I know you had some good signage at your pop-up.
Yeah, we'll work with city staff and maybe reach out to some of the other departments that would be part of that
When do you think we
approval
might have an
process.
answer I'm getting those neon street signs that are on
What?
wheels.
Well, ideally, we'd get something going before the community meeting on August 26th. And so we could provide an answer offline before the next meeting of the engagement committee to report back on our progress on that. How's that sound?
I wish we would have had one for this Saturday's meeting,
Oh, yeah, I hear you.
you know? I know, I'm glad I'm being heard. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to address and some questions that I have. I've been kind of waiting for patiently this time, like
Sorry.
the last times.
Sorry.
No, that's, no, actually, I echo what Vicky has been saying in the sense that many things have been asked, but we never get a response. And also, I do appreciate that there are, I don't know, however many email groups that things get sent to, but if I heard Vicky correctly, is that the committee itself was not informed. If I heard it correctly, Vicky. So the same
No, I
thing
didn't. Yeah, I didn't, Sodi. I didn't know about those meetings.
Yeah, so it is great, and we should be sending it to as many groups via however many channels we can. But the primary group that is supposed to be a member of this team is being left out, and that's not acceptable. The other thing that I looked at, and I do appreciate, and I want to thank M Group and the staff for putting this a report about the activities, the nature of them, the dates are going to be held on. But what is greatly missing is one thing that I asked and requested at least 2 meetings ago. And that was, what is the theoretical framework for the data analysis? In 2 or 3 sessions ago, rightfully so, and I want to applaud Jeff for mentioning that, because I specifically asked, when do we consider our efforts of outreach successful by the means of how many people are we getting to respond, whether to surveys, focus groups, whatever. Now, I am sure you guys already know that each type of outreach is an independent in terms of sample size, because the nature of the questions, format, everything is different. And that answer was 5,000 at least. When I look at the numbers, yes, but let me, if I may, even if it is 1,000, when I look at the responses, we are not even hitting 500, right? And we don't, and these are not even the same. I heard from one of the focus group members, they just reached out to me. I can't help it. They reached out to me and they said there was, I don't know, 10, 12 people. And then they didn't even get to the second question until like 8 minutes before the meeting was wrapped up. Going back to what Vicky is saying is that, and I have requested this before, we are not, nobody's sharing with us what these focus groups designs are, what the questions are. Those are important. It's not just that we don't trust your design, but are we chump change here? I mean, you recruited us so that we can provide feedback. And we are being left out of the equation, and that's, again, not acceptable. I don't know what the renter questions are. I don't know what the format is, what is the theoretical basis for the design of those questions and how it is conducted. And again, that's, I'm gonna make sure, Jeff, yield to you so that you can respond, and I'm gonna have a chance to finish the rest of my questions.
Thank you, Sudi. I just want to comment quickly. At one of the very first engagement committee meetings, we did share our focus group questions. There was quite a few of them. They were broken down into different categories based on the focus group categories, and then there was general questions that we would ask of all the focus groups potentially. I know I moderated that focus group you're talking about with the homeowners and then also with the renters. And the structure that we use for focus groups, it's a guided discussion. It's free form in general, but it has some key milestones that you want to address, namely the questions. But the questions, in my view, are really prompts. Oh, sorry, I'll turn my camera off. Maybe that'll help. Is that better audio wise? So I know I heard some criticism that not enough questions got asked during the homeowner conversation, and I didn't feel the need to rely on the list of questions. because the conversation just naturally evolved in a way that covered a lot of the questions that we had. I view the questions as something used to keep the conversation moving forward and make sure certain key topics are addressed by the group. But it's not a rigid thing where we have to ask a certain number of questions.
Well, actually, you do. If you want to have any scientific rigor to your analysis, while I
Yeah.
appreciate that you want to have it organic, the feeling of an organic conversation, there has to be some structure and rigidity to the design. Otherwise, it is not scientifically, forget science, but even like basic research is not reliable. We all know that any one of us who's done any kind of a statistical work, whether qualitative research or quantitative research, we know that. Otherwise, you can't compare, it'll be
This-
comparing apples to steak. It's not even in the same food group.
Yeah. Our goal is really to connect with people and hear from people in the community. So we might just have a different idea of how we approach the focus groups in particular.
Well,
And then
we need to know that though, Jeff, with all the respect, we are part of the committee here. Yes, we are not doing policy, God forbid we talk policy. But it is within the community engagement part, the questionnaire, those matter. I mean, we are supposed to provide you with comments and our insight, and many of us have, and we are not getting a proper response. I appreciate your response, but then it's really not a focus group. It's just sitting there and answering questions and asking, I wouldn't call it a focus group. I would call it hosting a reception without the food and the drinks and all of that. But it's different than when I hear a focus group, I think of a different thing than what you are explaining to me. But still, the issue also remains that I think as you update your plans, we should be informed ahead of time. So if somebody is dedicated, like Vicky is going out knocking on doors, she knows what the focus groups are going to entail, and we are not being given that chance. So and community engagement is the first building block of this whole process. And if it's just, walked over without some sort of a, credible plan, we are just picking off the boxes.
Yeah, I got to
Second-
back Sudi on that. I want to support that because I think if data gets challenged, you need to have the rigor behind it. And this has been a problem, with all cities, right? When you do this, why did you
Right.
come up with this decision? And then you have to have, to show the breadcrumbs directly back. And if the questions aren't asked the same in each of these forums, you can't say you derive the same outcome. You can't prove the outcome fits. So there's some concern that maybe there is a discussion part, but you may need to qualify the medium by saying, let's just get these 5 questions answered, even though we've heard everything, and summarize it so everybody can answer the question. So you have it. I think that's going to be challenging if you have a hard time passing this, for example.
Right. No, I
Thank you,
agree. I think
guys.
you are right. There has been some challenges. Of course, the challenges are usually from the NIMBYs. I'm not one of them, but there has been challenges to anything that comes out. My other concern or question is that we seem to talk about an extended community outreach over an extended, like 1 month or so, 1.5 months, or maybe 2 months. This is supposed to be the most critical part of the
Yep.
engagement, from whenever was this whole thing started, which wasn't just this year. This thing has been in the works for a long time. And it says in here, unless I misread it, that come November of this year, basically the Housing Commission is going to make a proposal to the project team. And more or less, that's going to be the skeleton or the framework within which the proposals or whatever is going to be written. So a lot of these events are just butting right against that date of November. And if, for example, housing strategies and opportunity sites, which in my humble opinion, is a very important part of this whole process and engagement, there's only one meeting, and only one meeting. There is when a site selection in August, but then the other one is in September, and that's it. That seems to, if I were doing any of the thing, I already know there is a shortage of housing. I already know that, no, it shouldn't be all concentrated. This is my opinion. It shouldn't all be concentrated around public transportation. What, people need housing, don't have cars, or that the bus route cannot be rerouted. or that we have a great transit system that everybody just jumps on the train and therefore everything has to be built around the train. We know those are not true. So to me, those are not, as an informed resident, or I like to think that I'm informed because I read a lot. For me, the biggest engagement activity is around housing strategy and opportunity sites. Yet there's only one meeting that is being done. So I would urge you to reconsider and actually add more. We spend so much money on so many useless stuff like printing out our annual reports or whatever it is. Put the money into having more engagements around the housing strategy and opportunity sites. And people who want to attend are welcome to look at the videos that maybe you guys can produce to keep it entertaining before they attend. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel of always housing 101 before you get to the meat of the matter. And then let's see. I'm just gonna primary land use. So again, I think the engagement portion is too short, too little feedback, and not enough feedback, no rigor into the study sessions, whatever you want. I'm just calling them generally study sessions. And then with respect to the Housing Commission's study session, I asked that because I don't want to surprise anybody with my questions. I requested this answer be provided. I will ask M Group and the staff, what is the specific deliverables of the study session, and what are the metrics to know if those deliverables meet them? That's a very realistic and I think a logical question to ask, and I haven't been given that answer. Thank you.
I also wanted to ask on the focus group, when you mentioned renters and homeowners, I think my concern, and sort of taps into what Sodi was saying and Dan and others, is that I'm concerned about a balance in the amount of surveys and where they're coming from. And so if we have, I don't know the exact number of people that live in Belhaven. Now, I always speak on Belhaven, but I'm a Menlo Park resident. I think I would like to get 100 surveys from Belhaven, 100 surveys from the District 2, District 3, so that we got a balance. Because if we get 5 surveys from Belhaven, I'm exaggerating, and we get 300 from the farmers market over there, I know where those votes are going to go. Okay, so I think it's critical that when we're doing our outreach, that we have to get a significant number of surveys from each community to really fairly see what people want, because that is the disparity that we've had in communities, is that people, for many reasons that I won't discuss, we can't get a lot of response from Belhaven. And there's a lot of history as to why, okay? But then if you want street signs west of 101 and 200 people show up at city council, those street signs go up the next day. Okay, I've seen it. So I think we really have to figure out what's the best way and most effective way to get as many surveys from each community. Because to me, if we can't get 100 surveys out of Belhaven, we haven't got an accurate inputs. And if we get 500 from District 3, well, again, that's where we have these disparities. So I think we need to focus on that strategically. And I'm willing, and I've talked to other people in the committee, to go and do the door-to-door, because you didn't talk about going to Saleska, which has a much higher population of people going there. You went to Mi Tierra Linda, which is fine. But Saleska is much more attended. Why you didn't go there, I don't know. I went there today and talked to them about getting some of their employees who probably live here or they commute here to get that input. I'm going to attack Safeway next, because it's those service workers that are the ones that are suffering because they're either commuting in here, they can't buy a home, the rents are, I want their inputs, because to me, those are the ones that are the most impacted by a lot of what's taking place here in these communities right now. Thank you.
I'm sorry to jump in. I know I just want to comment on Vicky's as well regarding surveys, is that I know I specifically gave a feedback, not that mine overrides anything else you've done, but I think there was some consensus there that, for example, the pictures in the survey about the different kind of units, they don't really reflect multifamily homes in a very nice light. And I think I gave the example of whatever is on one that is on one side, middle housing, whatever.org or .com. They have much better realistic images that will enable people to see it in reality. It's kind of like showing an empty house versus a, what is it, the staged house or something like that when you're trying to sell. So we are giving you these feedbacks, but they're not getting implemented.
I remember you bringing that up last time, Sodi, about getting these, and then you come up with the pictures that you have now, and they're nothing of what we discussed. And again, we keep going back to, we're bringing things up and it's not getting addressed. We're just saying it. And I think something's got to change in this process here. I feel like it's intentional.
Should we just jump in? Are we not doing the calling on people anymore? So I just want to, there are a couple of things. So I agree with Member Robledo. Like, I think the question of how do we make sure that we have an equitable distribution of responses is probably the main charter of this committee, is my understanding. I think all the points that Member Johnson and Member Robledo have addressed or brought up around what does this lead to, and you know, what's the process and is it rigorous? Like, those are all very relevant points, but also my understanding, if someone wants to correct me, is that the committee itself is really also focused on the outreach portion of it and making sure that we're collecting and we're having an eye on that piece of the puzzle, and maybe the housing element or committee has a different piece of the puzzle, and how if we can talk a little bit more about how do we make sure that it's more equitable, whether that is the sign, like Member Robledo had mentioned, that helps get the message out more in a more visible space, and maybe signs all around Menlo Park to make sure that everybody has a fair and equal chance of getting the access. Like, we should be talking about those strategies. And then kind of an underlying kind of meta meeting question is what are the roles and responsibilities of each member versus the roles and responsibility of M Group in terms of executing against the suggestions or exploring that. So to their point, you know, they've made suggestions. Is to what extent does the city of, like the Menlo Park city member groups explore that? How, to what extent does M Group support, like explore that? Like, I think it's a little unclear to me what the extent of the roles and responsibilities are versus members versus other folks on this call. And that might help us focus on what we need to talk about and better use of our time. Because if the analysis part of the focus groups, which maybe just give us qualitative data, it's not within our purview to actually, you know, change or whatnot, that we may move on to a more pertinent question around, like, right now we're getting a lot of responses from the farmers market, but maybe less from other neighborhoods and communities. And like, what are the strategies that we want to employ as a team and a group to make sure we get out, you know, those responses. So I guess to come back to the main question, what are our main roles and responsibilities? And then we should come back to the question of what is, how do we want to address the disparity in responses? Because I've mentioned it to a couple of people while I was at the farmers market. To be honest, a lot of the people who are responding, who are walking through, older and white, right? And that's not what I want. I mean, I want everyone to respond, but if it's disproportionate, like, we're just going to keep getting the same responses that we got 8 years ago. So I really do want to focus on what are the strategies to get a more diverse amount of responses, a more equitable amount of responses. Does anybody have a question, answer on the first part about roles and responsibilities?
Those are actually outlined, even though they're very stripped down and watered down. Strategies of communication, which includes the focus groups by definition, that the way at least I interpret it, are part of our roles and responsibilities.
So
Yes.
That's my reading, but others may have different.
It's all,
But
it's
like-
outreach strategies and ideas for accessing the right people and feedback, whether you think you're getting to the right populations and driving a change in the different kind of applications, whatever the consultant's recommending or the city's using. Those are all under this committee, but
We haven't done it.
housing strategy is not. So if we have a disparity right now, which is what I'm hearing regularly, we should probably have a discussion on between staff and the consultant. Staff has a lot of responsibility in this. They're the only ones who can do some of these things we've asked, and the consultant is forced to go ask staff. We should probably be asking staff directly on these calls sometimes whether it can be done so we can get the answer in real time. You know, that would help, I think, you, Tiffany, and some of the other questions. You know, we can get right through those.
Okay, so it feels like, to sum it up in terms of what we've discussed in the call, feels like focus groups may be unclear if we're getting a diverse like sampling of people, and furthermore, some of the questions are maybe not exactly as asked. But then as a committee, our pushback would say, hey, we need to employ other strategies to get a more diverse sampling, but also other strategies to get better survey responses.
You got it.
And what would those be? Okay.
Following up on that, you in the memo, it looks like you've gotten about 200 surveys back so far between the online and the paper. Have you done any analysis of, you know, how that breaks out by district? I mean, that would be really important to know, so we know how to tailor our
Critical. Sorry, Leslie. Critical.
Are we posting this on Nextdoor as well?
I think what I remember is we can post it on Nextdoor as individuals. So it's not like I'm sitting here like, I'm Tiffany, I'm a member of the CEOC, and I think everyone should do this. It would be more like, I'm Tiffany, I live in downtown Menlo Park. I saw this at the farmer's market. Everyone respond.
Yeah.
Is my understanding, but I don't think anybody has. I don't know. I get a little nervous posting on social networks, so maybe.
But I mean, Nextdoor, there's a big, fairly good sized platform on Nextdoor in Menlo Park. That my question is, why hasn't the city put the survey on there and made it accessible? Because again, I feel like there's I have no offense to anybody, the strategy is blocking the process.
Yeah, is that possible? As the city of Menlo Park, someone posting it? I don't know if that's Calvin or.
The city has a social media presence across what we would all think of as the normal channels. And they are posting things on those.
I've seen them, but I didn't see anything about these focus groups or about the survey.
Yeah.
So see,
this is about feedback. Yeah, this is getting feedback. So it should be the city, if you care about housing, right? And, you know, have a say in the housing, you know, plans for the future, that type of thing, right? It's pulling people in.
Rich.
Yeah. And so that kind of stuff should be relatively easy, and council members should do it also.
Process.
You know, it should be everybody, housing commissioners, council members, everybody should be posting these
I agree,
pretty
Rich, and I think the short and sweet. Are you, like
Yeah.
you just said, Rich, are you interested in housing in Menlo Park? Boom, you open it up and there's a survey.
Yep.
And here's the meeting dates. But why it's not been done? Like I said, it's almost strategically done to not be effective.
So who could we follow up to make sure or see if that's possible, Calvin?
So if I may, thank you everyone for all your comments, and they are very well appreciated and recorded, and city staff will work closely with the project team to make sure that your comments are considered and that we can get back to you if there are outstanding questions. With regard to the
Calvin, if I may, then you may want to extend the soon approaching closing date for the survey.
So we actually did already extend the survey once. It was originally scheduled to close on August 22. We have already extended it to August 29th. The reason why there is a particular deadline is because we also want to be able to provide to the CEOC as well as other decision and recommending bodies a vision and outreach summary. So in order to do that, we have to have a concrete date so that we can collect that info.
I disagree,
If I-
Calvin, with all due respect, because you can provide interim
Of course.
summaries without having the final, which was just asked a few minutes ago by Leslie. And especially if we're looking at what they've done to date, and we are finding, again, faults with it or inadequacies or whatever, however you want to, vulnerabilities, that's a better word, then it might actually end up being that nothing we've done to so far meets the standards that, let's say, I don't know if that's the one Rich, you were thinking of, but in general, they meet the standards of true outreach and analysis. So it is in our best interest that as we identify vulnerabilities in this process, that you should have actually provided some padding so that, you know, you can accommodate, maybe it's revamping it and extending the outreach program. Maybe it requires, you know, we are adding, what do you call it? People right and left to the city. So put one of them to do these things continuously from an analysis. Plus 200 surveys, that's not a lot, especially if they're all already, you can download the Excel spreadsheet, give it to me and I'll analyze it for you in 10 minutes. It's not a hard thing to do. So I would urge you to actually consider reevaluating, especially with respect to the renters focus groups, because they're the most vulnerable in terms of lack of housing. The homeowners, they have it. Yes, and they should be respected. There's nothing wrong about being a homeowner, but, or even businesses. Businesses don't lack housing. People lack housing. So they're the ones who should have more focus groups built around them. Not, you know, some head of some 5 business offices or whatever. They are not lacking housing. People are. So I would urge you to bias it toward the people who don't have housing and have vulnerabilities of housing insecurity.
Thank you,
I
Member
also
Trump.
I wanted to add that, can we get a time frame on, if you're saying you extended the survey, okay, so we didn't have any prior to the 22nd, so now we're extending to the 26th. I think it's imperative that we get some banners up throughout the community that say, we want your input on housing. Go to this website and fill out this survey. Short and sweet, not a long email address where they can find, simple. Because if I'm at a stoplight and I see, oh, there's a neon light that's saying, we want your input on housing. Go to this link. If I have enough time to see that at that stoplight, I got that info. But if it says www.this, I can't. Just Menlo Park Survey. Boom, menloparksurvey.com. And then if I'm downtown and I see a big banner that says, we want your input on housing, go to www.menlo Park Survey. Short and sweet. People can remember that, and we can get a lot of input from, and then do it in a couple of languages. I'd love to see one hanging on that street there on Willow, right here on Willow and Newbridge. It's a main artery here. A banner or a neon sign. We want your input about housing. Menlo Park Survey. I don't understand why, Calvin, great guy. I know you're going to hear what I'm saying and you're going to thank me for what I'm saying, but I'm about, what's the action? Give me a time frame when this can be done. Not thank you for it, because I appreciate the thank you. I do, but I want to see an impact on how we can really, really get the most surveys from the communities. And so I'm asking you, what's a timeline that you can look into this to get some banners? We got 5 banners throughout Menlo Park and a couple of neon signs on El Camino and on Willow. Maybe Marsh. We're going to hit some people.
And along the same lines, we expect a revision of the survey that is online and also handed out, assuming that you agree with some of the comments. So I think every comment should have an answer. This is one of the biggest problems actually the city suffers from, is that 3 minutes, residents talk for 3 minutes during public section of every city council. We never hear anything about it afterwards because the council cannot comment on it. You know, it's frustrating. People will give up being involved in their local government. You need to provide feedback. It cannot go into an abyss where there's no feedback ever.
I agree. And I thank you, all the members, for your comments. And I'm not saying that thank you as a flippant disregard of what you're saying. Please understand that is not the intention at all. We are all taking copious notes and trying to address all your comments along the way. some of these processes, including putting up a banner or putting up certain signs in different areas, they require different
Big time.
processes. Correct. There's a lot of different things that go into that. I'm not saying it cannot be done, but like whose land is that? What type of signage? Will it block visibility? There are a lot of different factors that we need to take into consideration as we hear your feedback, so that we can put these things into practice or get back to you. And I agree that we need to do a better job of getting back to you on some things that you have suggested in the past. I would like to acknowledge that some of your previous comments and suggestions we have taken on board. For example, just one of them was the housing resources flyer, which was very much appreciated by many of the people that we met with at our recent pop-up. So thank you for that excellent feedback. In terms of the online survey, the URL right now is publicinput.com/housing-element. And we have to do it through our public input platform, because that is the platform that we can use to track this data and do our analysis. And Member Johnson,
Okay.
if I may finish and respond to some of these comments, I will yield in just one moment. And also the Spanish one, just for others that are listening, is publicinput.com/housing-element-es. So this is the platform that we are using to collect the survey data. With regard to the focus groups, I want to assure the committee that it is not an intentional or a malicious intent to try to exclude people. Just to give an example of the focus groups, working closely with our public engagement manager, we sent emails to over 16,000 people that we had contact details for in the city. And total, we received about 175 people that actually were able to open that email and respond, and ultimately about 75 people who said that they could make the meeting, which then we filtered into those various focus groups. So it is not for lack of trying to outreach. So I want to assure you that that's not the intention, to exclude people. And we are informing our focus groups. We do have a consideration for geographic representation to make sure that people from different council districts are equally represented to the best of our ability. Of course, we can't force people to come to the focus groups, but we are doing everything that we can to invite them, and we welcome your feedback to continually improve this process.
Calvin, one quick response just is the summer time frame is always complicated, right? And typically you try to avoid getting all of your feedback during the summer because you get less people and less engagement, and there's just less going on now. With COVID, it's like been summer for a year and a half, but it is kind of challenging. So I think some of that response problem is probably, a lot of it is also summer and those things. And if there is a point we get to where we feel like we don't have the proper level of feedback that we want, is there a way to flag this so that council knows? Because what happens, I know, is there's a budget, right? And if this gets pushed back, it pushes back things, it extends the process, the budget needs to be expanded. I mean, it gets complicated, and I'm aware that I have a feeling we may run up against this tight deadline and not have enough feedback. And we may want to at least have a discussion lightly about it at some point soon, so that we're not surprising ourselves when we get there.
Yeah, so I'm amazed about how great the input is here from this group. I mean, amazed because it's so exciting to see how good it is. Number one, I think we have to accept the fact that we sort of have a questionnaire which will give us some amount of quantitative data, but this is really like observational psychology or sociology, or what an anthropologist 30 years ago would call ethnography, where you just go out and you observe and you write down what it is you think is there. And I think the thing that we're missing a lot of is, what are the hypotheses and things that are driving what the observations will be? And so the city council has hired M Group to bring that expertise to us. And I think they'll do a good job. I'm hopeful they'll do a good job, but we'll never know, because our job is really on the sampling side of that. And the sampling, we'll know eventually, but the sampling side is where we're focused. So it's about how to get the most input to them so they can get the most comments. jumping back to Victoria's comment about putting up banners and these signs, which I recognize, I ripped that off and said, put up signs on Marsh Road, like I see the Atherton signs. You know, next door could be tactically something like that, where each member of this group puts up sort of agreed upon sort of message that we get out there, and we just get as many comments as we can. And then we just feed that to M Group. And M Group does some kind of textual analysis of that. They sit around, they have their stickies, they put all the things on the board, and they try to divine what that means. And I would also suggest a new approach, which I would call the ad hoc pop-up, which is at whichever place, whether it's a library, as people come out of school, as people go into school, you catch the parents as they drop their kids off, whatever the community event is, you just sort of try to capture that same sort of sense. Here's the topic we're interested in, here's the feedback we're looking for, that's the hypotheses. Generate as much text as possible to feed to M Group, then to turn that into something that could go to the Planning Commission and to the city. I think those are relatively inexpensive things to do. For a few $100s, one can make a set of banners. To just speak tactically for a minute to Victoria's comments about putting them on Willow Road. If you want people to respond, make 3 of those banners and put it every block, so everyone sees it every time they drive by.
Yeah.
Oh, so the first time I saw it, what is that? Oh, second time I see it, well, wait, oh, that's what it is. Third time. Oh my God, they're serious. Oh my God, they're actually serious about my input. Let's go get it. So,
Yeah.
So I would suggest kind of a 2 or 3-fold approach to I think our job is just to generate the most textual data possible to M Group and to the city. And so, you know, they'll use textual analysis and team groups and bring in content experts and whatnot to figure out what that means. And so, and then the cheapest way to do that is to get to Nextdoor, to get to your, whatever your social network is of your neighborhood email list or whatever it is. And that's all I have to say.
So just going back to my raising hand, one is about what Vicky said about the simple, intuitive domain address. There's nothing that prevents a redirect. You can create the domain and have it redirect to whatever it is that is a required public website that you have to collect data. That's simple to create a redirect. I mean, we do that all the time. Going back to what Dan said, and if I heard it correctly, it ties to what I said before. What are the metrics? How do we know M Group was successful? And I don't mean to pick on M Group, I mean the whole project team was successful. There has to be some metrics up front, which we don't have. How many survey results are considered a success story? How many focus groups, attendees, and that finish it to the end are considered to be success? That's lacking. And I agree with you again, is you've seen those websites. If you lived here, you'd be home. You know, there's like 2 or 3 of them you see on the roadside that in the middle of nowhere. So those sequential, that helps. And going back to the staff report, the one thing I still have not seen, which is fundamental in any project that is done in sequence, where is the post-mortem for the existing 5th cycle? I have yet to see a postmortem. What were the vulnerabilities? Why didn't we achieve our goals? Without that, we are doomed to repeat the same mistakes. And
Well,
it's a lot.
so we did repeat. Because remember we had asked about the previous housing element survey that was done. We never got any response from that either.
But that's a policy issue. And I said, that's not a policy issue, that's a communication issue. And I don't want to do it, you do it. I'm not going to touch it. But we need to see it. You guys refuse to provide it. And because of my respect for the intelligence and the experience of the project team, I know you know the answer. If I had to make a bet, and I'm not a betting person, well, I am sometimes, I would bet you know the answer than not, because I have respect for your expertise. And I've begged of you before, please share it. And I'm not, and if you don't have it, you should have it.
Well, it was mentioned that they had a previous housing element survey. And we had asked about it before, Calvin. What was success? Was it successful? And if it was, what made it successful? What were the questions? Because we recreated the wheel again. We also brought up the city of Palo Alto having a housing element. And that went under the rug too.
Calvin, you want to just respond to that quickly? I want to give Tiffany a chance also to talk. I can't see all the hands. I have to scroll, so forgive me.
Thank you, Rich. So with regard to what has happened in the last housing element, as you know, every year we do an annual progress report for the housing element, and all those are publicly available online, and we have linked those as part of our project website from the beginning. As well, we have, if you want to review the last Housing Commission meeting on August 4th, the Housing Commission did have a very good discussion about what are some of the opportunities that can still come out of the prior housing element. So we noted that, for example, some of the moderate income housing category is we are not meeting our RENA requirements. So we had a very good discussion about, so what are some of the opportunities that we can do differently to change that for our current housing element that we're doing
Calvin,
right now.
I have reviewed at least in depth the annual reports. I even actually shared my results. Some of the people on this committee received them when I sent it to the staff, to BCC, to everybody else. I was told many people didn't get them. Why, I have no idea, but they didn't get them. I have done my due diligence the best I can. I've spent weekends and weekends doing, like I said, I have like a 58-page document of collection of references and my own analysis. That said, it is a formal document that should be issued by the Housing Commission or the staff or whoever within the city. It is not something that we'll touch base on it, we make comments on it, post-mortem reports. They have a certain format. They have certain content. And I'm not talking about flowers and things that where we talk about reimagination. I'm talking about facts. These were the goals. We didn't meet this. This is why. Explanations, a real, true, honest explanation of why it wasn't done. It's not something that can be done in 20 minutes in a conversational manner. A post-mortem report is a report. It's not a conversation.
Sudi, I know this question has come up before, and I'd like a chance to address it directly. The evaluation of the existing housing element is actually a major part of the new housing element that we'll be working on. But that is a work in progress. As Calvin said, we do have good data on the different levels of affordable units that were provided or not provided during the cycle. But the evaluation of the existing housing element is essentially a major chapter of the new housing element. Because like you said, you always have to look at what worked last time and what didn't work and why, and what changes are being made as a result of that. So it is a very important piece of the puzzle, and it's just we're not at that point where we have a draft of that we're able to share. But it is under it is under development. Typically, it wouldn't be released until the first public review draft of the housing element itself, because it is part and parcel of the housing element in its entirety. So typically, that's when you would see it.
Would that be the November of 2011?
November of this year?
I mean, I'm sorry, 2021?
No, it would be, help me out, son, on the schedule. Our public review draft, I think, is later in 2022, if I'm not mistaken.
I have no say in policy, but I think that is way too late to have a post-mortem when you're actually publishing your recommendation for a new housing element policy or report. That should be published way sooner so that people can also make comments on that, because there's a lot of insight as well as opinions about why that thing did not succeed. So I think, and I beg of you, whatever you do, please keep it concise to facts and analysis, not a whole lot of what I call flowery comments, which make the report to be 200 pages instead of the concise 50 pages, so that people they can actually go through it and grab the actual content. But I urge you to please expedite that, and that should be done before the actual recommendation to the city. It's too late by then, just like a lot of other things we do, it's too late by that time. But again, I'm not doing policy.
Acting Chair Klein, I just want to note that we do have a member of the public who has raised their hand and has been waiting for to speak. So we should open up at some point for comment on E1 and E2.
Rich, I'm going to interrupt. I'm just going to say I'm currently holding menloparkhousing.org.com right now, and I can transfer that or hand that to the city immediately after this or to M Group. So if you want a URL that's generic, that's for Menlo Park Housing. That's a tactical offering that I make to the team.
Wow, thanks.
I'll give you $5 for it.
$8.88 and $9.18. So
We have,
$20.
we have-
You can no,
we have a
point
deal.
is,
We have a
point
deal.
is not trivial to go do these things.
Thanks, Dan.
Tiffany, do you mind waiting until we get public comment and then you'll go next?
Yeah.
All right, let's have the public comment.
Okay, we will now open up the public comment portion for items E1 and E2. For members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment, please engage the raised hand feature at the bottom of your screen if joining by tablet or computer. If you're joining us by phone, please press *9 to raise your virtual hand. We'll have the ability to see your raised hand feature on our screens and then be able to open your microphone to provide public comment. We'll give a few moments for people to raise their virtual hands if they would like to provide public comment. And I already see that there is one hand raised. And I'll begin by calling Ms. Lynn Bramlett.
Good evening, Commission. I'm Lynn Bramlett. I live in District 3, and I was at the Housing Commission meeting too. First, I want to say I appreciate your comments and concerns very much. I pretty much agree with all of them, and I'm very concerned too. A number of points. The city seems to have gotten a very late start on a process that they should have known was coming. I am concerned about the city's long-term planning capability. This isn't the only plan that seems to have been started late and now is rushed. One of my main concerns is the lack of an apparent focus on the safety and environmental justice elements. The environmental justice element is also it's supposed to include even more of a robust engagement process because it's aimed at righting wrongs to marginalized people. So the housing element alone feels very rushed. As we heard tonight, there are a lot of concerns with the process. And in parallel, developments are moving along rapidly in District 1 that includes housing. The pipeline, as was in the Housing Commission report, is 3,192 units of housing in District 1 coming along, as part of this. So I ask if the city should not consider requesting an extension on the safety and environmental justice elements. My understanding is that the city could request one and get up to 2 years. That would give the city more time to do these elements justice. You're hearing a train go by. I live near the train crossing. At least you'd have more time for housing. So I just hope someone will bring that up. I introduce it now. Again, appreciate all of you very much, your honesty and forthrightness and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Lynn. We'll give a few more moments to see if there are other people in attendance that would like to provide public comment. Okay, seeing none, I turn the meeting back to you, Acting Chair Klein.
Okay. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you for your patience. I know you had a comment for a little while.
Yeah, it's just as a time check, so it's 7:30, and I've mentioned this multiple times to Chair Fennell and also Calvin, and just like the importance of being timely because I don't want it to run over and being respectful of everyone's time. So I'm not sure where that lands or leaves us with this meeting.
Let's see, the two action items, Calvin, I'll bring it back to you, that they seem to be kind of overlapping. One is presentation of, and the other is discussion of. So, it's kind of a blended process. We tend to discuss during presentation anyways. So I'm not sure if there's a if there's much more to this, I think we should get through any presentations we have now and try to hold comment till the end. But if there's new topics that we haven't heard or new information, that should be put up front so we can get that handled before the deadline, 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Acting Chair Klein. So we have received the presentation for items E1 as well as E2. We have also taken public comment and received feedback from the CEOC. So at your discretion, we are able to move on to the next item, which is item F, which reports and announcements.
Okay. Let's move to that, and then we can summarize at the end of this meeting if there's things we want to highlight and point if we have time, just to make sure we flag things on the way out. But let's move to the reports part.
So item F1 is reports and announcements from staff and committee members. From staff, the announcements would be just regarding the upcoming events that Sung from M Group has highlighted within his presentation. I would like to turn it over now if the subcommittee that was formed on July 15th would like to give a brief update. So just as a recap, on July 15th, the CEOC did form a subcommittee to discuss the process of the housing element update, as well as the CEOC's involvement. I did hear a little bit from Vice Chair Olaria today about a meeting that had happened, as well as an upcoming meeting. So I welcome other members of that subcommittee, members Robledo or Tronson, still in attendance, to provide any update that they wish at this time.
We have been having discussions. We're not quite ready to report, although elements of that are coming across as we speak. So we should have something within the next 2 weeks, at least for the next meeting. While I have this, I just want to say something very positive about the city, because I always seem like I'm not appreciating it. I really want to appreciate the city taking our request and actually starting to publish all of the recording and publishing, not just at city council meetings or certain commissions, but also committees. I have had several people, because I've been a very much of a long-term advocate of that and vocal supporter of that. And I've had several city residents reach out to me, and they just discovered it by coincidence. They were very pleasantly surprised. And I would recommend that you make a public announcement, because that is quite an accomplishment. I was so proud yesterday when the city of Sunnyvale announced, like on Twitter, their council members were talking about, oh, their city council meetings are going to be forever virtual, available, even though they might be open to in person. That I said, well, Menlo Park is doing it all, not just the city council, but the committees and the commissions. It was a very, I was proud of it. So I want to give kudos to the staff for doing that. And I want to say that I appreciate it, and it has not gone unnoticed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, City. And that is actually a huge accomplishment. Transparency is critical. Any other reports from other subcommittees? Anybody that's attended some of the meetings? We heard a lot tonight anyway, so it may just be redundant. Okay, I see a hand up.
Oh, I was gonna ask, are we able to continue comments on the outreach plan, or are we not?
Actually, what I'd like to do, we have 20 minutes left, so we have plenty of time. If we start flagging, start getting continuity on the main items we want to leave the consultant and staff with. I think we heard a lot of agreement around things, but if there's new items and you feel like things were underrepresented, I definitely would say bring those up now. And if you want to reemphasize things, that's fine too. I just want to try to get us to an organized list that we all know we're leaving hanging here, so we can hold everybody accountable and also, make it easy.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to emphasize something I think was brought up, but I don't know how clearly it was, or if this feedback was taken. But we have in the M Group memo, there's some discussions and paragraphs about the results of the focus groups. and just in narrative form. And there's going to be, once we get the results of the survey, there will also be results, and then those results will be somehow accounted for when M Group puts together their plans. But it's very unclear to me, how and who decides how to incorporate all that feedback. I don't know if that's within the purview of CEOC, but to me, that's part of outreach, is not just getting the feedback, but analyzing and interpreting the feedback. And to me, it's not clear how that's happening, if we can be involved in that process or not.
I'd also like to ask if there's a way that once we get a tally of how many surveys from every pool of the community, that we go, okay, if we only have 10 from District 2, maybe we should go back there. We only have 1 from Belhaven, maybe. I think there should be a way that we can see that through the statistics, as the surveys are coming in, which areas we really want. Because I feel like we really need to have a balance of all inputs. That's going to be, to me, the most effective survey. Equally, socially.
So I would like to comment on Victoria's. First, I'd like to apologize for stepping on Rich and and Lynn, who were going to speak. I got so excited finding the domain names.
No, it's all right. It's okay.
But I would also say that the bottom line is we have to get a good representative sample, but I think at this point, we just have to get a lot of sample. So I think our first goal is just to maximize, and then statistically M Group or whomever could figure out how to create the balance. So we just have to increase the number of responses in every forum where we collect data.
I think all age groups too, because as Tiffany was saying, if we're just getting 90-year-old individuals, nothing against 90-year-olds, we need to get a well-balanced, even for the future homeowners or future renters, we need to get some 18 and over, so that we have a full representation. I'm going to do what I can to really canvass the community and get as many. I'm trying to commit myself to at least minimum 40 surveys. That's a lot for me, but I'm going to try.
Yeah, it's hard. This is the trick, right? The 16,000 email list mentioned, and very low response rate. So, I know that there's certain, expected response percentages on these things, but
that's
still a little
just
surprising.
Because they've done these surveys multiple times already.
Yeah. And so then it becomes, I think what people have brought up is how do we, call out areas where we really have kind of a lack of response, right? In certain segments, whether it's geographic or demographic, just trying to do that. I think demographically it's harder, probably, to get that type of detail on, that type of sampling all the time. But I think geographically, at least, we should be able to have a pretty good kind of idea of where we're weak quickly. You want to take a risk at summarizing what we highlighted, and give everybody a chance to have feedback on that. There was a lot, but they fall into the same categories, if that's okay. But I also, go ahead. I heard somebody had a comment. If you want to finish up, and then I can do that.
Yeah, almost me. Sorry, I apologize.
That's all right. That's all right.
So one of the hypotheses I heard very strongly was putting up signs or banners. And so I think that should be that's a hypothesis that we have, that we think that could pay off in terms of increasing the amount of response we have, both geographically and overall. And so I think that's a question we ask the city and ask M Group. What does it take? How do we get this done, given how short the time frame is? And then we can do the cheap or simpler version of that, which is flooding our social networks with the same exact information on Nextdoor or whatever.
Yep. Okay. So, and I think that's the first one. So the takeaway being, we need to go bigger, much more visibility on the survey to drive better engagement and get more response, or at least more knowledge out there, using tools that we've used before on big community engagement processes, like the trailers with the the lighted sign trailers. I think the city, last I heard, had one or two. I think two. And using those in the right locations where we think we need to get more engagement, but also looking at the banners in the main thoroughfares and in the districts. And when I say districts, I mean multiple districts, right? Where are the banners that we can hang in all 5 that are going to generate that? Looking at ways to create more publicly accessible kind of engagements, looking at the meeting structures where you can have them outside and well lit, and then expanding the vehicles that we use, like schools. Have we asked Facebook? They probably have the best distribution list of anybody in the world in terms of Menlo Park and Belhaven, so they might have a list they could just send this to, just to get people the knowledge out there. I don't know, reaching, but trying to just take advantage of the partnerships in town that we have with schools mostly, and other institutions that have lists, and big lists. And that's even religious organizations that can communicate, in different ways to the community. So that's the amplification part. And I think that's one big piece with a lot of smaller details. And I think that's one. And then we can get into the other one, which is results, the actual questions asked and how we run those. And that's a little more complicated. But does anybody have any more feedback on that first takeaway?
No, but I was thinking in terms of being creative on how we get people to do surveys, which is something we discussed before with a $20 incentive. I would really, really, really love if we could do a free food basket type thing where we said, in Belhaven at the Facebook parking lot, if you come do a survey, you get a free food basket. I'm just throwing that out there because sometimes people need a carrot to be enticed, especially when it's a 20, how many questions are on that survey? 20, 15, what does it tell me? Someone?
19.
Oh,
19.
God, that we
Less-
narrowed it down to 15.
Less than 20, Vicky.
Okay, so then we should make it a $20 food basket or a $20 food. For every question, you get $1. I mean, the creative piece, people are, hey, we are what we are. We're humans. Give me something that's going to motivate me to do a survey and I'll go do it. And freebies,
Vicky,
always.
Vicky, along the line of what you're saying, we could source those food from small businesses around town.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of people that want the exposure right now. I mean, we are going back into, this COVID thing. That's another thing no one's brought up. I went to the farmer's market. It was pretty empty. So I think if I go out, well, I'm going to go out in my community, I'm going to be wearing a yellow vest. I wish we had something that would let us know, a city volunteer, so that people don't think, oh, who's this stranger coming up to my door? But, I engage a lot with my neighbors. So, I mean, there has to be something like staff volunteer, something that identifies me when I'm walking around, knocking on people's doors. But I think we have to be creative on how we entice people to want to do these surveys, because it is about their community. This is a great impact on each individual living in the city. So for them to be invested in doing that, they might have to cost us. It may cost us, but in the end, that's our goal, is to get as many people from as many districts as possible. So
I was gonna just comment just briefly about that, because I remember when we did a survey subcommittee meeting, and remember I had the suggestion of like, well, maybe we should have like different surveys for each district, and that was kind of shot down. So I'm just wondering if, because like what would entice one district may not entice another district. So how do we do something that's equal but equally enticing, if that makes sense? If not, we'll be I
just thought of something. If we gave them a $20 gift certificate to a farmer's market, that's food, that's enticing. And for families that are struggling, like you said, each community is different, but yet the same, but different. Sorry.
What happens with I know with the money, it becomes a budget item, and then it has to go back and be decided by people who make the decisions on budget. So that one may take more time.
It does, Rich, but you know, when I think about the $90,000 they wanted to spend on Christmas lights, whoa,
Yep.
slap me in the face.
No, I don't think it's not about money. It's about the process, right? So
It's about money, Rich.
Yeah, well, it's process, because I don't think you're going to ask for much money, but you still have to go through a process of approval, right? The $90,000 tree had to go through. It had to go through the same process.
I would have thought
Yeah.
that there is a maximum, like there is a threshold above which you have to, I'm sure we can imagine some clever ways of not having to waste the council's time with, $10,000 kind of
No,
expenditure.
it may not be council. It's just, it's got to go through a discussion with budget. Whereas the others, if we own the banners, if we own those things, there may be a production cost, but owning those are faster. So that there may be a shorter term and then a midterm, like work on that also, but to get, what can we have staff do as fast as possible, right? Given the timeline.
And you're right, Rich. You have enough experience in city policies and politics that if the city really wants a successful survey, then they have to step up. And
Right.
so we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for consultants. And if we want surveys, and it's critical right now for our communities, then we need to try to put pressure wherever that pressure comes from to let's get these surveys and let it be hopefully the last one for a while.
I'm surprised that it was not part of the budget of this process to begin with, because if I'm going to do a user study and submit it as a grant application, I'm providing certain incentives, and that's part of the budget and planning. So I'm surprised that nobody thought about the fact that we have to provide incentives. That seems like such a commonplace activity, but anyhow.
I shouldn't have made an assumption. Calvin, is that included in budget? Because I could be completely wrong.
So the overall outreach plan was included as part of the approved scope of this project. With regard to if there was a specific line item for these types of incentives, I would like to defer that to Jeff, who may have more insight on that. I unfortunately joined the process a little bit later, so I don't have that insight that I could share with you.
Okay.
We have two line items that may be stretched to cover this type of thing. One of them is simply, we have $2,500 for direct costs, and that's typically things like printing and postage and some web service fees that we encounter with projects. But that was the task item. I was going to take the $25 gift cards that we had already committed to. And then there's a larger budget of $7,000 in kind of this ill-defined task to partner with nonprofits. And that was that idea of if we got some of the community groups really engaged and wanting to come alongside us, and we could pay a stipend to help for someone to help us with the community engagement and get the word out. That potentially could be considered as a small pot of money to pay for incentives for folks to participate with the survey.
Cool, there's money. There is money then, yeah, but there's also the idea that we act on the nonprofit outreach, right, and those things, and sounds like we didn't yet.
No, we have. We've reached out to over 60 community groups.
Okay.
And we're continuing to talk to the ones that are the most interested in learning more about this.
Vice Chair has a video up, so she's now Vice Chair again. As long as you have video.
No, not really.
No,
you're still
Okay.
Vice Chair.
Okay.
I feel a little sometimey about the whole local nonprofit thing, because sometimes it just feels like the middleman, and it's like I feel like pockets of money go to nonprofits and we just kind of lose track of how it's spent. And I think that's one of a community gripe. And I know several people have contacted me saying, they would, if there's some structure to it, be willing to like go out and do surveys and whatnot. But yeah, I feel a little weird about giving, unless we exactly know what the relationship is going to be and the purpose. I think it's a little dicey when you involve a middleman when we already have several, kind of.
Yep. Okay.
I agree with what Nahizi said. And it just seems our politics from federal to state to city is predicated on having lots of middlemen instead of providing direct assistance as well as direct outreach. That's nothing against a lot of great work that nonprofits do. But if the idea is to engage with the end user in this situation, why not use that ourselves to reach out to the people we want to reach out? And if it's necessary to provide something to the nonprofits, I'm sure they will take a promissory note from the city that we can pass through our budget process or whatever, so that it does, because I'm sure they would trust the city and they would take whatever payment they have, we are promising them down the line. And we could go ahead and put that money to use for direct engagement. And also, again, perhaps Calvin, you can confer with the rest of the city staff. Do we have a petty cash? I mean, I am sure there's some things that the city manager can do that she doesn't go for approval for every cent that she spends. I mean, that if she did, that would be pretty bad in terms of how budgeting process or approval process is done. And again, I would urge that we use any kind of a funding we can. Let's say if you're going to spend $100 on some sort of a food, maybe you can get a 10%, not gouge the small businesses, but spend maybe 10% discount, get the food, whatever, or gift from small business. I'm not talking about big businesses.
Yeah.
Small businesses, that way you're helping the people as well as the small businesses in the city.
So
Put that down as a sum. Yeah.
I just want to jump on that, Sudie, because I've been thinking this whole time, what about the soft money that comes out of local businesses that increases traffic? If we have better housing, they get better customers, more customers, et cetera, et cetera. It seems to me that that is a key thing for us. I don't know if that's something that we do as the CEOC, or if that's something that comes out of M Group or the city. I don't understand those relationships. But it seems to me there's a lot of capacity just sitting there waiting. Because every time I've been involved with school groups, PTAs or whatever, the local community businesses are always willing to put in surprising amounts of effort to make things work.
Yeah, so we'll add that down. If we have the first one, and really what we're looking for is, if Calvin, if there's a way that you could work with the team in general and then get back quickly to the chair or vice chair, or however the communication needs to work quickly, so that feedback gets back on looking at more visibility, and the banners, and looking at those lighted carts, and looking at, like we talked about, if there's ways to work better with libraries or work better with schools, or even just getting more exposure, the way that we put the meetings up and next door, things like that. That is item number one that needs a quick response. Could we have that as the first one, getting feedback on the, let's just call it the accelerating the visibility, right? As fast as possible.
Also, I think if we could do some really hard, excuse the term, hardcore outreach at the schools. I mean, we have schools, Bellhaven School.
Yeah.
I mean, we have schools here, the daycare centers, that those are parents. Most likely a lot of them they are residents here or renters, and those are who we want that input from.
And we couldn't do anything until they're back to school, which is now. So you can take advantage now.
That's true.
Yep. Which I think is great.
It's almost 8 o'clock, family.
Yep, I'm summing up. And then number two is the one that's a little more complicated, but I would like to throw it over, and Calvin, if you give me quick responses on it. It's the one that has to do with it's the information, right? And the aggregation of the information, the question and answer process. Why isn't maybe the next time we meet or report back explains the, we don't have to ask the same questions. Here's why, or here's the process for getting the answers. Also, here's the number of surveys or the response percentage and from where, and is there ways that we can get updates on that? We don't have to have information that you may deem not passable to the committee, but I think knowing where we need to emphasize more work and getting an idea of where the feedback is coming from is very important. And I think that was a big part of the discussion. And then it's also just looking at, is there a problem the way it's teed up for people to access it? Are there other domains that we can use to make this easier for people, or is it just a function of using public input and we just need to start educating people on using it? And if that's the answer, that's fine, but we just need to know that so we can move on to other items. And then there's the important piece, and I think people add really quickly to this because I know I missed some critical details on that item. But also the public comment around the safety and the environmental justice, and are we putting enough rigor into this? Do we have enough time? Is it wiser to look at this and be realistic and say there's no way we're hitting the 29th, rather than waiting until the 23rd or 24th and saying there's no way we're hitting the 29th? Is there a way to kind of revisit that, and with that feedback being a part of it? I'm trying to summarize, but I know, add in people if I missed some things or I just way downplayed your point. I didn't mean to.
I would just like to point out, thank you, Rich, for summarizing those points. I really appreciate it, and it will definitely help the project team with direction to as we proceed in for the next few weeks. One thing I wanted to point out just before we close is that the city, we are posting on social media regularly. I know at least today I saw a scheduled post to talk about the upcoming community meetings, as well as previous posts that have gone all the way back to the beginning of the project on like Instagram and Facebook. So if you join the city's accounts, that might be an easy way for you to reshare. I'm not on social media a lot, but I think that you can reshare the city's posts. So that might be an avenue as well to get that info across to your individual networks.
Under your own header, right? Your own headline, it could be, are you interested in housing Menlo Park, right? If you want to have a say in housing, but yeah, you can have your own banner over it and then have a link, right?
Exactly. Or you can just reshare the official city post.
Okay. Do you have any idea how long it would take to get some of the feedback, like in terms of our, using banners and things like that, the stuff that we need to get on the street pretty quick? Is there could you get that done, early or mid next week or something, or get feedback quickly?
Thanks for that question. So again, not to downplay the request, there are a lot of different factors that go into that I can just think of, like in terms of safety, insurance, liability, all those different things. I'm not saying it can't be done, but those are things that need to be looked into in terms of the feasibility for that. So I don't want to speak off the cuff and promise a date that I just don't know at this moment, but I can assure you that that is something that city staff as well as the project team will look into and respond as soon as possible.
Okay. Okay, if there's anything anybody has to add, or if there's anything that the consulting team or staff wants to say about what they've heard, let's wrap up.
There were a few other comments, including consideration of the revision to the survey, its layout, side by side of the pictures, as well as updating the pictures. I think that was also one request that was made.
Yeah,
and, yeah.
I could respond to that in real time if it'd be helpful. I'm not a data scientist, but I know some members of this committee have a lot more experience with survey design and analysis than I do. And the one thing I do know is that changing the survey midstream would basically mean we'd have 2 different surveys and we'd have to provide analysis on each one separately. And we couldn't have a consistent benchmark being the survey itself. That would just give me great pause before we go down too
No,
far
no,
down that road.
I hear you 100%. One was, of course, any change, even if it's a layout change, will have an impact. I understand that. But also, should we do an analysis to see how effective that survey is? Because if it, yeah, I know that you don't change horses in the middle of the stream, right? We know that's a great song. But if we had to, because we're gonna drown later, because, you know, we have to consider that. And I'm not, so I hear you and I acknowledge that, but just maybe meet among your own group and see if it's worth the challenge. That's all.
Okay. We can do that.
Other comments?
Yeah, so the only thing I would suggest to from the committee through Rich to the city is we've used the term street banner, but let's be flexible. If it turns out hanging something across the street involves getting Caltrans involved and all sorts of liability, let's figure out what 2 trees the city owns and string it up between those 2 trees or whatever.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. Good point. And you're exactly right, Caltrans. Yeah, that's exactly right. Caltrans is going to be one of your bugaboos on every time. Okay, thank you. All right. Any other comments? I can't see anybody's hands, but
Yes, I was just gonna say, we
please.
have our police substation, which is definitely underused. That if we were to offer some type of that incentive to bring families, because we hang a banner out there that says, hey, come do a survey and get a $20 farmer's market certificate. And then the station was open where people could come in and do the survey. I mean, that's a building that's right in the heart of the community. Well, at least near food. And if the great thing is there's 4 restaurants. There's a Starbucks, there's Jack in the Box. There's like 5 restaurants there. That's the type of creativity I want us to try to do to get people, lure them in. But like they said, the substation's a perfect place for people to do surveys. If it was only 10 questions.
got it. Yeah, 10.
Anyway, night, guys. Thank you so much.
Okay, Vice Chair, last question, and then we'll.
Bye.
Bye.
The only other comment, did anyone mention during the meeting, you know, at the farmer's market, if that's still going to be pursued, there is like a table where people can purchase like tokens with their EBT card. So that could be an area where you can get people, because a lot of people stop by that section, because it's like if you buy $10 worth of EBT coins, I think you get like $10 free. So that, I know people stop there for sure.
That's a good one. Okay. And the consultants heard that, hopefully, and we'll apply that and provide feedback quickly.
Got it.
Thanks. All right, that'll wrap up the meeting. Thanks, everybody. We have lots to do, and hopefully we'll get quick report back to Chair, Vice Chair, and we can see what kind of action we're taking in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.